My name is Eli Mercer. I was with the U.S. Forest Service for 17 years, mostly out west, Montana, Idaho, Washington, places that aren't easy to find on a map unless you've bled into the soil. Most folks think the job's about search and rescue or cleaning up after drunk hikers. Sometimes it is, but mostly it's silence. Long hours in a lookout tower, logging soil conditions, tracking elk movements, reporting weather. It's peaceful if you know how to sit with yourself. But peace can rot into something else when you're too deep for too long. I was stationed near the Bitterroot Range when the first one happened. It was mid-October. Snow hadn't come yet, but the air carried that edge. We got a call about a missing father and son. They'd gone camping 2 nights earlier. Usual story. No check-in, no signal. I've been on dozens of these. 9 out of 10, they turn up embarrassed, cold, and hungry. That last one, though, that one sticks with you. We set out early, myself and Ranger Keeley. Keeley had been on the job 4 years, good instincts, never talked much. We reached the family's last known GPS ping by mid-afternoon. Nothing was out of place. Tent zipped, fire pit cold, gear still stashed. Except no one was there. No drag marks, no struggle. Just 2 empty sleeping bags and a fresh catch hanging from the tree, untouched. Here's the thing. Whatever took them didn't touch the food. Whatever came through wasn't looking for meat. Keeley pointed out something I hadn't noticed. There were boot prints, 4 sets. The father and son made 2. The other 2? They were barefoot and far too large. That's when I started keeping a journal. Not for protocol, for myself. Because I knew something was wrong and nobody would believe it. A week later, we lost radio contact with Tower 9. It was manned by a rookie out of Spokane. 2 nights in, he'd made a call about a light. He said it wasn't the moon, said it wasn't moving right, said it flickered like it was behind something. When we got there, the place was ransacked. Interior scorched like there'd been a fire but no ignition point. Gear still in place, coffee half full. He was just gone. They said exposure, that he must have fallen or gotten turned around, but there was no trail, just a single line of footprints leading away from the tower. 30 steps, then nothing. You hear stories like that and you think, yeah, probably an animal, probably weather, something you can name. That's what the human brain does. It names things so we can stop fearing them. But I stopped naming after what I saw in Glacier. That winter, I was transferred to assist with a structural survey up north. High elevation zone. Beautiful terrain, but rough. We hiked in by snowmobile and set camp at the ridgeline. On the second night, I woke up to the sound of breathing. Not snoring, not animal huffing, breathing. Heavy, labored, slow, close. I didn't move. I didn't unzip the tent. I just waited. When I finally got the nerve, I rolled over to check my watch. Battery fried. Just dead. Like it had been microwaved. I got out the next morning to find our tracks. Erased. Like someone dragged a rake across the snow, but only ours. It was the way the woods felt that got me most. They were quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no rabbit tracks, just absence. You don't forget that kind of quiet. It presses in, fills your lungs. It makes you feel like you're the intruder. And that's just it. I started to realize something most folks never will. These woods don't belong to us. They never did. What's out there, what's always been out there, it's not interested in us. Not in the way a predator is. Not like a bear or a cougar. It watches, it waits, it learns. I wasn't alone in this. I wasn't the only one logging these patterns. Rangers in other states, Oregon, Utah, even as far as the Appalachians, began to pass things along. Notes, voice memos, stuff we never filed officially, and they all told the same kind of story. Time jumps, paths that looped, lights that weren't lights, voices in places where no people should be. That's what the series is. 8 encounters, 8 logs, all real, all documented, sometimes in writing, sometimes in whispers. I'm going to walk you through them, one by one. I want you to listen closely, because what you're about to hear isn't legend. It's not folklore. It's what happens when the forest notices you, and once it does, it never forgets. Stay with us here on MindFuel. Subscribe if you haven't. These aren't one-off ghost stories. They connect in ways we still don't fully understand. Come back for each chapter. Rewind them if you have to. And if you've seen something out there you can't explain, you're not alone. You never were. I got the first call about it in 2013. A hiker, solo traveler, was coming down off Elkspire Ridge around 6 p.m., late season. Low sun. He was maybe a half mile from the main trailhead when he saw it. He said it looked like a man, or what his brain wanted to register as one. 7 feet tall, maybe more. Thin, long limbs, gray clothing, or maybe gray skin. He couldn't tell, but it wasn't doing anything. Just standing, right off the trail, 20 feet into the tree line. No motion, not even a sway. He watched it for 2 minutes, then 5, then 12. He thought maybe it was a statue, maybe a prank. But something kept him rooted. He said he tried to yell at it. No response. Threw a stick toward it, nothing. And that's when he realized. It wasn't blinking. It wasn't breathing. The stillness wasn't natural. It was too perfect. He backed away, returned to the ranger station, pale as a ghost. I remember the way he looked when he walked in, like he hadn't taken a full breath the entire hike back. I went out there with him, same trail, same bend near the overlook, and nothing, except the forest was quiet. You ever notice how forests are never silent? Even in winter, there's a hum, a twitch, a crack, something living. But this stretch, dead, no wind, no insects, just the sound of our boots and my own breath in my ears. The hiker stood behind me, whispering, "It was right there." It didn't even flinch. I humored him, logged it as an unusual sighting, gave him a radio to call if anything else happened. But I'll be honest, at the time, I chalked it up to exhaustion. That changed 2 months later. A seasonal volunteer, Alana, radioed in from Trail 7, said she spotted a man standing between 2 pine trees about a quarter mile from the old ranger cabin. She said the shape was off. Long legs, no coat, just grayish skin. No facial features she could make out. Just frozen. I asked if he responded when she called out. She said she thought he nodded. I asked, "You're saying it moved?" She went quiet for a second, then said, "No, that's the thing. I only think it nodded. But I don't remember it actually moving." That line stuck with me. I drove out. Same outcome. No one there, no animal signs, no sound. Third report came from a firefighter during a prescribed burn near the southern ridge. He said his crew stopped because someone radioed in a figure in the clearing ahead. He described it the same way. 7 feet, still, unblinking. The team turned around for just a few seconds to grab gear. When they looked back, it was gone. What's worse? The ground where it had stood, charred black, before the fire reached that section. We ran soil samples, nothing conclusive. But the burn line was wrong. Like the ground had been dried out before heat ever touched it. I started calling it the standing still thing. I wrote that name down in a private log, not the official ones. And over the years, that phrase came up again. In whispered reports, old logs from the 90s, ranger notebooks from Oregon, Colorado, even northern Maine. Always the same pattern. a tall humanoid figure standing motionless, sometimes for minutes, sometimes longer, and always in silence. A silence that eats the world around it. I remember speaking with a veteran ranger from Nevada who had taken early retirement. He was candid with me in a way others weren't. He said, "We don't know what it is, Mercer, but whatever it is, it waits." That hit me harder than I expected, because something about the thing, it wanted to be seen, but not chased, not approached. It was like it was studying our reactions. One hiker, years later, said something that still gives me chills. He said, "It didn't move like us. I don't think it can. I think it waits to be seen. I think that's how it learns how to be us." That same hiker disappeared 2 months later. His gear was found. Backpack, boots, journal, but not him. The last page in the journal read, "It was in the same place again, exactly where it stood last time, but closer." I've been doing this a long time. I've dealt with cougars, escaped convicts, even cult activity. But nothing's ever made me leave a section of forest unpatrolled. Until that. That trail remains closed, officially due to landslide risk. But unofficially, no one wants to be the next person who blinks and finds it standing closer. We're still collecting sightings, still building a pattern, but one thing's clear. This thing, whatever it is, doesn't hunt the way we think. It waits, it watches. And if you lock eyes with it too long, you may not like what looks back. If you're watching this, stay curious, but stay careful. The next chapter is only going to get stranger. Subscribe to MindFuel if you haven't. We're pulling these stories from real reports, real people, and some of them aren't around to tell you themselves. There's a pattern I started to notice about 5 or 6 years into the job. It's not in the official paperwork, not in the training, not even in the whispers you get from senior rangers. It's in the tracks. I've spent most of my life reading ground. You learn to read the way a deer stumbles when it's been spooked. You learn how melting snow shifts a hiker's path. You can tell a sprint from a limp. And when something doesn't follow those rules, when the earth tells you one story and your eyes tell you another, you remember it. It was January, thick snowfall the night before, the kind that wipes the world clean by morning. Perfect conditions for tracking. A 6-year-old boy had gone missing from a family cabin near Cold Pine Hollow. Parents thought he was playing just outside. 15 minutes later, he was gone. No signs of forced entry, no blood, no drag marks, just a single line of footprints heading north into the forest. I was part of the 2nd SAR unit, called in. Day 2. We began the grid sweep around 6:45 a.m., following the boys' original prints deeper into the tree line. At first, everything made sense. Short stride, toes pointed forward, lightweight, consistent with a child under 50 pounds. The tracks we followed were clean, no signs of struggle, no animal prints nearby. But 3 miles in, we stopped, because something changed. The prints reversed. They didn't turn around. There was no pivot, no drag marks, no break in the pattern. One step, he was walking forward. The next, it was like his feet had spun backwards in place and started walking in the opposite direction, heel first. Perfectly mirrored. I radioed it in. Our tracker, a guy named Lou, knelt down and stared for a long time. Then he muttered something under his breath. The human foot can't turn like that. He was right. The new set of prints, the mirrored ones, they were anatomically impossible. The arch was too wide, the heel pressure too deep, the stride almost exact. But it wasn't the kids, not anymore. We followed them anyway. What else could we do? You follow the signs until the signs stop. And about a mile past the point of reversal, the prints did stop. Not like he stepped off trail, not like he was picked up or carried. They just ended. No scatter, no struggle. One final backward step, and then smooth, untouched snow in every direction. We kept searching. Hours turned into another day. Then, 2 days after he vanished, he was found, curled up beneath a firewood tarp behind the original cabin. No frostbite, no injuries, but silent, eyes open, awake, just not there. EMTs checked him out. Physically, he was fine, but he wouldn't speak, not at first. When he did finally say something, hours later in the medic tent, it was this. He was walking like me. That was it. He wouldn't say who he was, wouldn't say where he'd been. I asked the mother privately if he'd ever used that phrase before, walking like me. She said no, said it gave her chills. I pulled the log weeks later. I wanted to know if anyone else had reported anything similar in that area. 3 years earlier, a hiker had vanished off the same ridge. Last known location put him about half a mile from where we lost the kid's tracks. SAR found that hiker's prints too, only his ended the same way. Backward and gone. Here's what keeps me up about that case. Something out there was watching that child close enough to copy him step for step. Close enough to make those steps seem almost human. Close enough to wear him like a trail. We don't know how the boy got back. He couldn't explain it. Never did. He's 12 now, still lives in state. But the parents won't speak publicly. I don't blame them. Some things don't get tied off in a neat bow. Some stories keep walking, and if you know what to look for, you'll see them in the snow. Footprints that face the wrong way. Steps that mirror your own. Paths that shouldn't exist. Keep your eyes down, and if you ever notice your own trail walking back toward you, run. Stay with MindFuel. We've got more of these logs, more you need to hear, but you need to stay sharp. These aren't just stories, they're warnings. Subscribe if you haven't. Chapter 3 is next. And what happened on that mountain? It never should have been possible. Time is supposed to be constant. Doesn't matter how deep the forest goes, your watch ticks, your pulse beats, the sun rises and sets, until one day it doesn't. In the spring of 2019, a wildlife biologist named Chris Harville was tracking elk populations across a stretch of forest in Central Oregon. He wasn't a ranger, not SAR, just one of the regulars. Scientists, trackers, environmental monitors, people who spend more time in the trees than under a roof. Chris had been using trail cams to track migration patterns. Nothing special. Standard motion-activated lenses, mounted high, calibrated for time-lapse footage. He was organized, methodical, always hiked with GPS, wore a digital altimeter on his chest strap, kept analog backups in his pack, and he always logged every step. On May 12th, he hiked out to check a camera he'd set up 4 days earlier, just off a game trail near Hemlock Bend. Narrow path, unmarked, dense trees. His plan was simple: retrieve the SD card, log the temperature, swap batteries, and head back. A 2-hour trip, tops. He left the station at 1:07 p.m. He returned at 5:40. But when he reviewed the footage, something was wrong. The camera had been set to record a time-lapse every 10 seconds. He expected over 700 images. He had 189. The timestamp showed the lapse began at 1:52 p.m. and cut out at exactly 2:22. Then nothing. 30 minutes, gone. The next image wasn't until 2:54 p.m. A clean jump, no error, no dead battery, no weather interference. And that missing window? That's when things got strange. Chris remembered that stretch clearly. He said he had paused, just for a break, sat near a split cedar halfway between 2 old elk rubs. That's when he noticed it. Not sound, not movement, but motion. Too fast. He described it like watching the wind skip forward. The branches weren't swaying. They were jerking, like time-lapse, only in real life. A gust would move the top limbs. and then the bottom ones would twitch 2 seconds later. But there was no wind. He looked around, all normal. Then his watch stopped. Not dead, just frozen. 2:16 p.m. His GPS blinked, then reset. No signal. Cell phone rebooted on its own. He said his first instinct was to stand very, very still. That's when he realized something else. The forest around him had become too bright. Not the sun, not lens flare, just a subtle overexposure, like he was standing under invisible LEDs. He blinked. It went away. When he hiked back, he followed his GPS path exactly. But when he reached the ranger outpost, something didn't line up. His pedometer showed he'd traveled 8.9 miles. The route should have been 5.5. His GPS logs, once recovered, showed a zigzagging, stuttering path that placed him 3.4 miles east of where he should have been. But he swore under oath, he never left the trail. The camera? Untouched. No footprints near it. But here's where it gets colder. The first frame after the blackout, at 2:54, shows something unusual. A branch in the foreground, blurred, but not in motion, split. Like the lens had captured 2 moments at once. One frame of the branch pointing up, another where it hung lower, both layered into one image. Chris called it a glitch. The station logged it as light distortion. But the tech who analyzed the SD card said something different. There wasn't a frame break. No error, no corruption. Just 30 minutes missing. Chris didn't report anything else. But 6 weeks later, another researcher reported time gaps. This time further north, near an old ranger fire line. His audio recorder captured 2 hours of birdsong compressed into less than 5 minutes. Then, dead silence. The Forest Service doesn't have a name for it. They don't talk about it. But some of us started calling those places time holes. Not portals, not wormholes, just breaks. Breaks in continuity, like the forest holds its breath and forgets what moment it's in. Chris quit the job a year later, moved out of state, but he still keeps the camera. He says he won't erase the footage. He watches it sometimes, frame by frame, looking for something new. Not for what he saw, but for what he missed. Because whatever happened in those 30 minutes, his mind may have skipped it. But something in that forest didn't. Stay alert. Stay with MindFuel. The stories don't slow down. In fact, the next one breaks a different kind of law. Time wasn't the only thing that cracked out there. In Chapter 4, we find out what happens when something inside the trees starts answering back. Fire is honest. It consumes. It spreads. It leaves nothing in its path unless something stops it. Stone, water, wind, will. Firefighters trust this. Rangers do too. There are rules to it. Even chaos, once you understand it, follows a pattern. So when a burn crew sees something that doesn't follow, something that resists flame without reason, they remember. They don't speak loudly about it. They put it in the margins of the logs. They use words like unburned anomaly or fire exclusion zone. But out there in the field, under the ash and smoke and silence, the language changes. That's where this story comes from. It was a crew out of southern Montana, seasoned wildland guys, not rookies. Joint operation with the Forest Service. Purpose was clear: controlled burn across a section of pine that had been hit with bark beetle infestation. Dead trees, dense fuel, perfect conditions for a strategic sweep. They mapped it, cleared it, ignited the line. Everything followed plan. 3 hours of clean burn, low wind, 0 complications. Then they left the site to cool. 5 days later, a smaller team went to assess the interior damage, check for flare-ups, spot embers, and that's when they found it, a ring, roughly 30 feet wide, circular, dead center of the burn zone. Everything around it, everything was blackened, scorched to soil, but this ring was green, untouched. No soot, no blistered bark. It hadn't just survived, it hadn't participated. Inside that circle stood 13 trees. Not new, old, rooted, uniform. And in the center of those trees, there was something else. A deer, standing upright, eyes open, limbs locked, rigid, dead. No wounds, no burns, no visible cause of death, no blood, just frozen. One of the crew, a sawyer named Briggs, radioed the find. Said it didn't look like taxidermy. No cuts, no stuffing. The body wasn't stiff from rigor. It was locked, like it had been posed. They walked a circle around it. No footprints, no ash blown inside, and no sounds. The birds that had returned to the outskirts of the burn, they weren't singing here. No bugs, no flies, no smell. Just a cold ring in the middle of ruin. A ranger on the site, Collins, I think, said something that stuck with me. He said, the flames went around it, like they were afraid of it. They took samples. Bark, soil, the deer's fur. All came back normal. Normal pH. Normal tissue. No heat exposure. But the GPS logs? That was different. The drone footage showed a clean burn path. You could see the ignition lines, the spread, the smoke columns, everything traceable, until you hit the circle. On playback, the drone's telemetry skips over it. It records the flames reaching the edge, then they jump past it, like it edited out the fire refusing to cross. The feed cuts for 4 seconds, then resumes, showing charred trees beyond. No heat signatures in the ring, not during the fire, not after, as if the heat wasn't allowed in. That footage was marked for internal review, never released publicly. I had to see it for myself, and when I did, the part that got me wasn't the flames. It was the trees. Every one of them leans ever so slightly inward, toward the center, not because of terrain, not wind, like they're leaning in to listen or watch. The logs mention follow-up inspections, but none of them go inside the ring. Not one entry records a ranger crossing that invisible boundary. And months later, when the undergrowth finally started returning, the plants grew around the ring. Never through it. As of last year, it's still there. Still untouched. They don't burn. And maybe it's not because they're immune. Maybe it's because something out there refuses to let the fire in. Maybe some places are meant to stay untouched, unchanged, unwitnessed. We're not supposed to stare too long at those places, but here at MindFuel, we do. We gather the reports, the whispers, the footage. We walk into the places most people walk away from, because fire doesn't lie. And when it does, something else is speaking. Stick around. Chapter 5 is next, and this time, the trees themselves start to answer. The dead don't lie. In the end, the body always tells the truth. That's what coroners say. That's what pathologists learn to believe. Until one day, it doesn't. In late October 2017, a body was recovered in the Bitterroot Range of western Montana. Hikers had followed a trail of drag marks, 4 parallel lines through thick pine needles, spaced too wide to be a bear, too even to be accidental. At the end of the path, they found him. Male, mid to late 40s, no ID, no gear, no shoes, lying on his side in a shallow gully, no visible signs of decay, no animal activity, but his eyes were open, and they hadn't clouded. The coroner's office in Missoula took the body in, and what they found wasn't supposed to be possible. It started with the skin. At first glance, it looked normal, pale, unburned, mostly intact, but under the microscope, the texture was wrong, too rigid. Each patch, particularly across the chest and neck, was divided into overlapping plates. Smooth, reflective, almost like scales, not reptilian, not amphibian. They weren't natural to any animal the lab had studied. Underneath, things got worse. His organs weren't just damaged, they were rearranged. The heart was found inside the right lung cavity, rotated counterclockwise. The liver extended vertically. His intestines were shortened, looped like a spiral, as if something had tried to replicate a human digestive system. But didn't quite get it right. There were no tattoos, no dental records matched, no missing person report within 500 miles even remotely resembled the man's appearance. And then there was the blood, thin, watery, almost translucent in the vial. It clotted too fast, but it didn't dry. Under genetic analysis, the sample revealed something no one expected, a helix, but not our helix. The structure of his DNA included an additional coil, a third twist along the double helix strand, triple helix bonding, completely unknown in humans. One technician said it looked almost synthetic, like it had been edited or replicated from a base model. But when they tried to map it, the genome kept collapsing. The code wouldn't hold, as if the information inside the blood wasn't meant to be read. The lab tech who leaked the initial findings, anonymously, said the case file was marked as closed within 72 hours. The official cause of death? Probable animal attack, large carnivore, exposure complications. But even the coroner didn't believe it. They didn't log tooth marks. There were no punctures, no tearing. And the blood. It didn't bleed like a person, the tech said. It ran clear, like water over stone. The body was never buried, not cremated either. It was reportedly transferred to a state lab. But the chain of custody stops after that. No digital trace, no barcode match, no photos, only a few copied notes that surfaced years later, scanned, smudged, and passed around on forums nobody moderates anymore. But if you believe those notes, and if you followed the other stories in this series, then one thing starts to become clear. This wasn't an isolated case. This wasn't a man who got lost and died strangely. This might not have been a man at all. Because the deeper we go into these stories, the more we find things that look human, that try to be human. But when you open them up, when you strip away the mask, the systems inside are off. Not wild, not feral, engineered. By who or what? We don't know. Not yet. But here at MindFuel, we're not turning back. This isn't about chasing monsters in the dark anymore. This is about documenting what's already here. Coming up next, Chapter 6 brings us to a region where sightings keep vanishing from federal logs, and one ranger's radio call that was never supposed to go public. If you're watching, keep your screen close, and if you're listening, stay very quiet. The wilderness plays tricks on you. Ask any hiker who's gone off-grid for more than a few days. The isolation gets inside your head. But what happens when it stays there? In early September, a YouTube channel run by a seasoned survivalist, trail name Ridgewalker, posted a 40-minute video. Only a few thousand people saw it before it was pulled. It wasn't clickbait. No flashy music, no spooky fonts. Just a man sitting in his cabin, recounting the strangest 5 days of his life. He'd gone deep into the Chugach backcountry of Alaska. No camera crew, no rescue beacon. Just a topographic map, dried food, and years of experience. He was documenting animal trails, testing gear. But then, something changed. He was on day 3 when he noticed it. A stump, moss-covered, split in the middle. Not unusual. Until he passed it again, and again. Each time, he was sure he'd changed direction, left clear markings, checked his compass. But there it was. Same stump. Same leaning birch just beyond it. Same cluster of rocks at the base. He filmed the spot, dropped a marker, walked 2 hours northeast, still ended up at the stump. He said it wasn't like a dream, not hazy or surreal. It was worse because everything felt normal. The air, the temperature, the sounds of birds, insects, wind in the trees, but he began noticing something else. His thoughts. They weren't tracking right. He'd think about his next camp setup, and then find himself thinking it again 5 minutes later, not remembering it, repeating it. Entire thoughts would loop back. He'd go through a survival checklist in his mind: food, flint, knife, and then find himself starting over. Not out of panic, not forgetfulness, like something was feeding it back to him. He said it felt like walking through a copy of the woods, like the forest around him was remembering him and playing it back. On the 4th day, he stopped marking trees. Every time he cut bark, it would heal overnight. Not scar, not dry, heal. On the 5th day, he woke up and found the stump again. Only this time, there was a fresh boot print next to it. His own, pointing toward the stump. When he checked his GPS logs, the path data showed something impossible. 5 days, 34 hours of walking, total ground covered, 50 feet. That's it. 50 feet of drift. He hadn't left the same quarter-acre radius, not once. The surrounding trees matched, bark patterns matched, even animal tracks, identical, every day. He didn't film much after that. Just a final clip of him staring into the camera. He said, "I don't think I was trapped. I think I was held." He stared into the lens for another 10 seconds. Then he said, "I think the forest was copying my thoughts, or feeding me its own." Then the video cuts. 2 days later, the channel was deleted. The original video is gone. Re-uploads are muted, corrupted, or abruptly vanish from the platform. But one thing remains consistent. Every person who's seen it and remembers the full footage says the same thing about the last few seconds: that the trees behind him weren't the same as the ones at the beginning, that their branches were twisted, almost like they were listening, or waiting, or remembering something, too. There are places in the world where distance isn't real, where memory is recycled, where the thoughts you're having may not be your own. At MindFuel, we document what science ignores: the loops, the copies, the footprints behind the footprints. Because it's not always about where you're going. Sometimes it's about what's following you there. Up next, Chapter 7, where we investigate a drone pilot's final transmission and what he captured in the treetops before the signal vanished. Don't look away. We think of bones as leftovers, waste from a kill, the aftermath of something natural, inevitable, death, decay, scavenging. But what if bones weren't just remains? What if someone or something was using them as material? In late spring of 2021, a series of flagged trail reports came in from northern West Virginia in the Monongahela National Forest. Wildlife biologists doing population surveys along a closed path, deep, isolated, rarely trafficked, started noticing a pattern. Bones, but not scattered, not chewed, not broken. Each one had been cleaned. Vertebrae mostly, arranged in spirals, hung from low branches, tied together with old pine root and sinew. Some placed like miniature trees, each rib branching out like limbs. None of them had markings consistent with animal predation: no bite, no crush, no drag. These weren't discarded remains. They were built. The Park Service documented it, quietly. No public alert, no closures. One of the field ecologists, name withheld, left an anonymous note on a wildlife biology forum a few months later. She said the bones were appearing in places they'd already cleared, that she and her team removed several of the structures one morning, carefully documented them, photographed everything, returned the next day to find twice as many, in new formations, taller, more intricate, rib cages stacked into crude ladders. Vertebrae spiraled into symmetrical towers like vertebral pine cones. One even resembled a crude face. Empty sockets carved into the ends of femurs. A jawbone turned upright. Not scavenger work, not art. Purposeful. Their team set up 2 motion-activated trail cams, each placed 20 feet above the forest floor, aimed down at the main trail fork. One was destroyed. Lens cracked, memory card snapped in half inside the housing. The second camera wasn't touched. But what it captured, at 2:13 a.m. on a windless night, wasn't easy to interpret. The figure appeared from the tree line. Thin, pale, no visible facial structure. It moved low, on long arms that dragged slightly behind it. At first, it didn't react to the camera. It didn't seem to be watching anything at all. It simply gathered. From a pile of bones near a base tree, it sorted and stacked them like someone building a puzzle. They already knew the solution. 2. No trial. No hesitation. One rib, then another, then 3 vertebrae aligned so precisely they locked together without binding. And the longer it worked, the slower it moved. Until eventually, it just stopped and sat, kneeling in front of the effigy it had made, as if it was praying to it. Then the cam froze, not powered off, not corrupted, just held the final frame like time had paused. For 7 minutes. Then it resumed. Empty frame. The structure was gone. So was the figure. No sounds, no broken branches, no trace of passage. The footage was never made public. But fragments of the report were leaked. And tucked in the margins of one photocopied scan, someone had written this. These bones weren't left behind by predators. They were curated, with purpose. MindFuel has reviewed the alleged metadata. Dates match. Location exists. Whether the footage was real or part of an elaborate fabrication, one thing is clear. That region of forest, between unmonitored peaks, too rugged for easy foot access, has a higher than average rate of missing hiker reports going back decades. None ever found. No gear, no clothing, no bones. Whatever is building those structures may not be collecting remains. It may be reclaiming them. And if these artifacts aren't just decoration, if they're not just ritual or instinct, then they're communication. Language, written in what's left of us. Keep your eyes on the trees, because next, Chapter 8, the final story in this volume, takes us above the canopy, where a drone pilot's last transmission captured something he didn't see, something that moved between the treetops without touching a single branch. Subscribe to MindFuel to stay with us, because when the forest goes quiet, we keep listening. There's a moment in the woods where reality begins to unravel, a moment when what you see isn't what you get. In early 2019, an anonymous ranger from the Cascade Range came forward with a story so unsettling it was buried for months, discredited, dismissed as hallucination, even threat. The ranger, who we'll call Agent W, agreed to speak only through a trusted journalist after being blacklisted by the Park Service. His story starts with a late-night call about a lost camper. Agent W found the man just inside a thick patch of firs, disoriented, quiet, shivering, but otherwise unharmed. He asked simple questions: name, where he came from, how he got lost. The camper smiled, a slow, almost friendly smile. But Agent W said something was off. The smile was too wide, teeth too sharp. The camper's eyes held a strange stillness. Minutes later, as Agent W radioed for backup, he heard screams. Running toward the sound, he found another camper. Same man, same face, panicked, bloodied, shaking, screaming that something was chasing him. This version wasn't smiling, it was terrified. Both men looked at Agent W, eyes locking on him, before disappearing into the darkness, as if swallowed by the forest. When dawn came, there was no sign of either camper, no footprints, no blood trail, Nothing. Weeks later, Agent W was reviewing trail cam footage near his cabin, where he'd been out on patrol the night the campers vanished. On a still image, he saw a figure lying on the floor inside his cabin, sleeping. The figure looked just like him, but he was outside, miles away, on duty. He knew the photo was real. The timestamp matched that very night. He told the journalist, "I wasn't home that night. I was out on patrol. That's what scares me. That thing, it copied me. Or maybe replaced me." Some nights, the ranger says, he still hears footsteps around his cabin. Soft laughter, whispers that mimic his own voice. And sometimes, when he looks in the mirror, his smile feels wrong. MindFuel brings you stories like this because the forest isn't just a place, it's a presence, a force that watches, learns, copies. If you've stayed with us this far, you're one of the few who dare to see the woods beyond the trees. Don't forget to subscribe to MindFuel, because this is only the beginning. The forest has many faces, and it's just getting started showing them. Join us next time when we dig deeper into the shadows and the secrets that don't want to be found. Until then, stay curious and stay safe. Forests hold secrets older than recorded time, secrets that defy our understanding of nature and reality itself. Ancient truths whispered between the trees, buried beneath the soil, waiting. Every so often, something emerges, a shadow, a shape, a presence, something that shouldn't exist. And when it does, it pulls a piece of the impossible into our world, a fragment that haunts the edges of reason. Tonight, you've seen just a glimpse, stories that challenge what we think we know. But this is only the beginning. MindFuel will continue to dig deeper, uncovering reports that shook the very foundations of biology and science. Stories too strange, too eerie for most to believe. But not for you. If you've stayed with us through every chilling moment, then you're ready for what comes next. Subscribe now. Join us for Volume 2, Reports That Broke the Biologists. Because the forest doesn't forget, and neither do we. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and above all, stay safe.